Okay, so here we are. We're making history. This is the launch of Rock Talk podcast right on Kensington Avenue in the city of Philadelphia, right in the heart of the drug epidemic in the city of Philadelphia. Just a few things before we get started with our first guest, Pastor Kevin Fluharty. Um, Many years ago, that I felt led to come back to the neighborhood that I was raised in to start a ministry that I had no idea how to do, and I really didn't. But in the midst of just my wife supporting me, and my pastor Joe Foch at the time supporting me, and just my friends and some of my close friends and my family members supporting me, I ventured off and started this ministry called Rock Ministries of Philadelphia. And it clearly was designed to reach inner city youth with the gospel of Jesus Christ through boxing. We didn't have any other sports. It was just boxing. And, uh, and, uh, and the reason why I was led to do is because I was training kids in a gym, and a friend of mine had a gym, and training kids there, and we were developing some really good talent. And this particular kid that we were developing, we wound up taking him to the nationals, and he was in the finals, and he lost a controversial decision, and as a result of that, I was saddened for him, but I didn't see him for 2 weeks. And at that time, I didn't know where he was at, and I couldn't get in touch with him because I didn't have his phone number. I didn't know where he lived. He just was a kid coming into the gym. And so finally, it was a Saturday morning, and I'm teaching a Bible study on the prison block at the House of Correction in Philadelphia. And sure enough, this young boy comes in, and he had an orange jumpsuit on, and he basically had committed murder. And I was so saddened by that, and so distraught over it. I stood up and cried, and I hugged him, and I says, "Hey, come here. I want to teach you about Jesus, because I never talked about my faith at all with these kids." And so it was at that point in time, over the next year or so, that I felt like I didn't want to train kids anymore. So I stopped training kids, and then about a year later, I started to really have this burning desire to do something, with the, with the boxing gift that God had given me, and I said, how can I use this, or how can I help the kids in the inner city? And it was like a light bulb went off, and I somehow, some reason, it was go and train kids, but do a Bible study, and so I went and asked a good friend of mine, is Joe Han, a senior, good man, friend, lifelong friend, and he had a gym, a very successful gym at the time, and he had 2 floors. So he said, gave me the keys to his building, and he says, "Go ahead." So we went down there for about 9 months to a year, and we started it. In fact, I had many people where I got pizza one time. Like, we got like a half a dozen pizza pies, and I had all these people, about 13 people. I said, "Talk me out of this," and that's a true story. Like, talk me out of this, dude. And so nobody can talk me out of it. And sure enough, we started it at his gym, and then about a year later, this building came up for sale, which we're sitting in today. It's on 2700 block of Kensington Avenue, in the heart of Kensington, and it had no windows, it had no heating system, the floors were caving in, it was mold, you name it, it had it. And so we purchased this building, and put my house up and people thought that I was completely crazy for doing this, but sure enough, I don't own this anymore. No man owns this. We incorporated. We're 501c3, which means that if anything happens to the leadership of the Rock, or something happens, we won't. No one will be able to sell the properties. It's just basically we give it away to the next people. This is not a money making machine here, So now, moving forward, we since have expanded not only boxing, but weightlifting and grappling, and so many other things. We have a chaplain corps that goes out and deals with the homeless and anyone's in crisis. We deal with, we have the Lost Coin where we have homeless. It's like a homeless coffee house on Fridays. We have a chaplain center where people can come in and receive help with their addiction, whether they're homeless or they have mental deficiencies or they have insecurity with food insecurities. And then ultimately we have a church. We meet every Sunday at 11 a.m. and which is broadcast live on Facebook and our social media platform. So a lot has happened in over the last 20 years. So, but in that time frame of 20 years, there have been so many people who have come to the Rock and really have been called the same way that I'm called, the same way, very same way. And so as we launched the Rock Talk, I think it's important that you're able to meet exactly who they are and why they came to Kensington. I know I was crazy and people thought I was nuts, but apparently God creates even people that are crazier than me. And I'm going to introduce you to one today because he's just a good man. He's been with the Rock for 15 years, and he left his job. And he's a full-time missionary. With his wife and 3 children. In fact, he moved out of the suburbs and moved into Kensington, where he resides for the last several years, and he's now our youth pastor. And so, that being said, let's get into it, and I want to introduce you to Pastor Kevin Fluharty.
So here we are. Here we are.
Well, I mean, listen, we go out a lot.
Yeah.
Lunch and
Yeah.
Honey Grow is not to advertise Honey Grow, but that's one of our stops.
That's one of our spots, yeah.
And we talk a lot. So I know a lot about your life. I mean,
sure.
Since you've been here for 15 years, but there's a lot of people who don't.
Right.
So I do have a question for you, though.
Sure.
I'm going to have a lot of questions for you.
Good.
So what made you quit your job, sell your house, and move into Kensington with your 3 boys? What made you do? Why did you do that?
Man, so I've always kind of been involved in sports ministry. In my adult life, I've been involved in sports ministry, and I've always had a desire to work with kids. And through that sports ministry, and my wife and I have been praying about what it like. Ministry together. So we found out about Rock Ministries. And as we were coming here a little bit, and then it kind of became a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I just felt a disconnect, between me and the kids in the community, and just really praying about, where the Lord would have us be. He really laid it on our hearts to say, hey, I want you down there. I want you to be accessible. I want you to be available for the kids, for the youth in the neighborhood, on a daily basis, 24/7. So we put our house up for sale. It was a crazy season of life. We were meeting all along the way with the house going up for sale, and through my knee surgery and everything, and how the Lord just opened up the opportunity to get us down here. But the Lord clearly put it on my heart and my wife's heart to move down here and be available for ministry every day.
So let me ask you, how about your wife? How is she? What's her take on all this?
Well, the first
one
time,
day I hope to have her here too.
Yeah. You may have to put a veil or something. So I mean, when I first walked through the doors of the Rock, I was sold. I knew, I was like, man, this is where God wants me to be. But it's more than just what I needed. It's like, okay, well, what's my wife's take on this? I had to make sure she was comfortable with it. We were praying about a ministry for her and I to be part of, not just me. So when I went home and I told her about Rock Ministry, she was like, okay, it's a boxing gym, it's like, because that's all that was here at the time. It was just boxing. So when I was talking to her, it's kind of like, well, where was her fit in the mix? Where was the Lord going to use her in the mix of just a guy's boxing gym? So we we just continued to pray about it. I was still coming down 1 to 2 days a week, and we were praying about it, and then girls kickboxing developed, and I go home. I'm like, hey, there's girls kickboxing. And she's like, and what does that mean for me, right? Because she's not an athlete. Like it's just not her role, And so then I was like, look, there's girls there. Like, you should come down. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So she came down, and sure enough, there were other girls that didn't kickbox. They just sat on the side and they talked, and right around that same time, there was somebody else who started coming to serve at the Rock, and they sat together with the girls, and then, the Lord just continued to develop opportunity for her as well, and she started to feel the same desire. Because at first she was like, I'm not moving to the city. She was like,
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I want to move to the city. She
Yeah.
said the Lord's gonna have to do something big in my life to say, like, hey, I want to move down. So. The Lord did something big. He opened up opportunity for us both to be here, put a calling on both of our hearts to be here. And it was actually my wife that said, if we're going to move down here, we need to be walking distance from the ministry.
Amen.
So the reason why we're so close was because she felt that was where we needed to be. And I was
Right.
like, listen, I'll live right out front. It doesn't matter.
That's
but she's
true.
got to be good, So,
That's true.
yeah.
No. So 3 of your children, were they born here, or did they move here with you?
They all moved here with us.
They all moved here with you. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were all born in St. Mary's Hospital outside of
So
the city.
you live literally a couple blocks from the Rock.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
we're about 4 blocks
Yeah.
from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. So you said that there was just boxing and then kickboxing. Now we know you're I don't want to get the color wrong. So
Right.
what are you? What belt are you?
I'm a brown belt.
You're a brown
in
belt. So
jiu-jitsu,
what's the
yeah.
next one up?
Black belt.
So I know. Look, I know the backstory.
Yeah.
So you would be a black belt. Trust me.
Yeah.
3 years
Yeah.
ago. But you started. Now, was it Steve that started that? Were you here when
Yeah.
that started?
So
were you involved in that? Because
So Steve was already here teaching jiu-jitsu here. So yeah,
when
Steve
you were
was
here.
already
Okay.
here, yeah.
Okay.
So but he was kind of in the same place. Like, he was coming down and helping when he could.
Yeah.
There was a handful of kids that would come in and do jiu-jitsu. And I met Steve through that, and I had started training jiu-jitsu and MMA prior to coming down to the ministry. So I had an MMA background, training with guys, jiu-jitsu a little bit, and I fell in love with jiu-jitsu more than getting punched in the face. So I was like, I like jiu-jitsu a little bit better,
Yeah.
But yeah, Steve kind of had already started a little bit of a program here.
Okay, so let me just go back to this is like a little inside thing. So I remember many years ago, I was in pretty good shape at the time, and I got a couple minutes in me, but before I had like a half hour in me. So I remember one time saying, and I said, "Come on, put your hands up." So he looked at me, and then what he did, he sat down on the ground, and he said, Come down and meet me where I'm at. Remember that?
Yeah. I told him, I said, look, one way or another, one of us is going to end up on the ground. I'm probably going to choose to go onto the ground. So,
well, that was funny, because then I knew you were crazy. So I knew you got to come to the Rock. Man.
Yeah.
So, but let me ask you this, Kev. I mean, I really appreciate, obviously, your dedication to the call in your life. I mean, I respect that, and I know everybody. I mean, the kids. Throughout the years, that's one thing they saw in you is a sturdiness.
Sure.
And we deal with so many homeless. I shouldn't say homeless kids, but kids who have no father figure.
Sure.
So they don't understand. The yes is yes and the no's no. A lot of them are just mixed up. But when they see you and your wife and how you're raising your children, it's a great example for them that they will never ever forget. I remember, and I've talked to you about this before, many years ago, I was 10 years old in Kensington, and this guy, we call him Mr. Green Jeans.
Right,
He used to get, come on in, kids. Come on in, kids. Well, here's the thing. Come on. He used to do a Bible study, a Sunday school every Sunday. Well, guess what? We used to make fun of them. I mean, like throw stuff, cussing like a drunken sailor. No offense, sailors, but my point of it is, we were like crazy inner city kids. But guess what? 54 years later, I was 10 at the time. 56 years later. 55 years later, I think of this. I had to count, but I think of him.
Sure.
Because he planted seeds of hope in my life. Isn't that what you're doing now? Because as we move forward, I'm going to get into this,
Yeah.
what's going to take place. But isn't that what we're doing now? Isn't that what you're doing with the kids?
For sure. I mean, and that's all I have to offer, right? That's all I have to offer. Like I don't have anything special about me, you know. It's just what God has done in my life, and the hope that I've received through Christ is the same thing that I want to offer to these kids.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. So let me ask you something. It's okay for a kid who loves Christ to be able to fight.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say to the people who say, listen, you know, you're a Christian and you guys allow kids to get punched in the face, punched in the nose, what would you, or grappled or tapped out? What would you say?
I mean, I've had people ask me that, and you know, it's a sport. You know, it's a sport. We're not raising up thugs. We're not raising up bullies. We're raising up kids to learn discipline. We're raising up kids to know how to protect themselves. Sure, but it's a sport. I mean, it's a sport of boxing. It's a sport of jujitsu, and there's a confidence that comes from the kids that I don't think you can get from anything else. You know, so my three boys, you know, they all do jujitsu with me, and one of my things with them is like, hey, I want you to compete. I want you to compete. You don't have to fall in love with it, but I want you to compete because you'll know what it is to have that kind of pressure, to have that kind of stress in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone ever challenges you, I mean, we're in Kensington, right? Like if another kid comes up and wants to start a fight or whatever, you know, I want them to know like, hey, I know how to carry myself in this. And it goes on to many things in life, right? Like they're going to have a one-on-one interview with a boss. They're going to have tough conversations with people. They're going to have, and it comes like self-control, respect that comes from it.
Good point.
You know, so I think, you know, it's a sports ministry. You know, we're not saying, hey, we're a combat ministry. It's a sports ministry.
Okay.
We're teaching the sport of something. And, you know, I think there's a lot of elements that come from it, you know. And you could look at football. You could look at wrestling and say like, well, look at the culture in football. Look at how aggressive they are on the field. There's football players that are, you know, they're just out there going crazy. Like you could pick anything, you know, and have a negative view on it. But realistically, when you look and you're like, you may have some kids that fall into that, but for the most part, and the majority is that this is a tool and an opportunity that we have to use to bring kids in Philadelphia. We're talking about a fighting city, right? So like,
Yeah, man.
we got kids that are
Amen.
like this. That's part of their culture, you know. So it's I see it as a sport and a strong discipline that aligns with Scripture, you know.
So let me ask you this, Kev. Can you give us a little bit of your background, like, you know, where you were raised, you know, and what was your childhood like? I mean, I think it would be great for people to hear
Sure.
your testimony, how you came to know who Christ is, and then now you're a youth pastor. So
Right.
how does that all
Yeah.
happen?
So I grew up outside the city. You know, I had never been in the city.
Where
Well,
at?
So I grew up in Bucks County.
Okay.
So really small section of Bucks County called Wrightstown. So you had like Wrightstown, Penns Park, Wycombe. Like there's all these little towns up there. And I grew up in one of those little towns. You know, man, there wasn't much around. You know, when I was growing up. So I'm 40. I'm 42. I'll be 43 this year. So in the 80s, growing up out in Bucks County, you know, there was still people driving around asking you to buy like photographs from the airplanes of all the farms and the fields and stuff like that. So I grew up around nothing but farmland. You know, I grew up around farms, and as a kid, you know, I was a high energy kid, just like a lot of the kids I run into. High energy kid, no direction. You know, just kind of all over the place. I feel like my parents, in a lot of ways, they try to do their best. I think, you know, some of their values may have been off, you know, and I think they had some things there. But you know, I remember as a kid, you know, very very young, going to church with my family, and like my dad was on the end of the pew, and that was my mom, then me and my sister, and then if I was acting up, I had to get sat between my dad and my mom and all. And I'm, you know, at some point that ended. You know, the pastor of the church had changed, and my dad was like, I just don't want to go to church anymore. I don't know him. I don't like the way he is. Like, I'm just not going to go to church. So at that point in time, my church experience kind of became very spotty. You know, my grandmom would still try to get us to come to church.
How old were you around?
Oh man, I was
five.
probably 6 or 7,
Okay.
somewhere around there, 6 or 7, that we stopped going to church consistently. And then, my mom would try to get us to go. My grandma would try to get us to go. So like I would go to church here and there. There was, a program called Awanas, and we did that on and off. But it was my grandma who was kind of like pursuing that. My mom ended up getting saved through a women's ministry, a ladies retreat. So she wasn't even saved yet. So she gets saved at a ladies retreat. And then things started to kind of turn around for her, and she started to see like, as a family, there's things that she needed to do for her kids and try to get us to church and all. But by the time that happened, I was like junior high age, and I was already starting to make friends that I probably shouldn't have been around. I was already starting to get into just some of the stuff that I was not good for me. I had opportunity to just kind of break away from some things and go towards that life of like less structure. My dad worked a lot of different jobs. He worked at night all the time. He worked during the day. So for me, I'm like, he really wasn't present.
Did you work with your father at times?
Yeah. So we worked nights on the weekends. So from when I was 6 years old, we used to work for the Philadelphia Inquirer, right?
Wow.
Bagging papers, and he would go deliver papers when the Inquirer had subcontractors, and he would stand me on a bundle of newspapers so I could reach the table and fold newspapers. And we would do that, 11 o'clock.
How many did you fold?
Probably in the hundreds every
so
night.
I remember because I was an Inquirer kid.
Okay.
It was
So,
like, shoot.
Yep.
Right?
So depending on the paper, it was either three
Not
folds.
Sundays. You didn't do Sundays.
I did Sundays, yeah. I
No,
did
but
Sunday
you didn't
papers.
fold Sundays, though.
Yeah, we did. We bagged and folded Sunday papers in the plastic
That
bag.
big
The
stuff?
big plastic
Oh,
bag.
wow.
Bro, I got them
Yeah.
forearms from folding them
Wow.
papers all those
Okay,
days.
all right. Nice.
So yeah, so we would do the Sunday paper. So we do Friday nights and Saturday nights, and basically the conversation was either you can do this and get paid, or do this and not get paid.
Oh, right.
And I'm like,
Wow.
I'm gonna make some money,
Yeah.
right? What kid doesn't like a little bit of cash, So
Right.
I was like, I'm gonna do it and get paid. And I did that till I was 18 years old. Working every Friday and Saturday night when I was 6 years old to 18 years old.
So that developed a work ethic in you.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the work ethic though came from the desire to have some money in my pocket.
Wow.
I think that was one of the bigger driving forces, was the money in my pocket. Because when I turned 18, I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. There's no say. I'm 18 years old. And I had other jobs along the way.
What time did you? How old were you when you left your house? When you moved out?
I was 20. I was 22.
22. Okay.
Yep. So I bought my
Okay.
first house when I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah, but I bounced. We were, as my parents were working a lot, we were in different people's houses, sleeping there, staying there, watched over by a lot of different people from the church and just from school and things like that. My grandma had us over her house all the time because she would try to get us on the weekends so that we could go to church and things like that. So, it didn't always work for me because I was always with my dad working. But then like during the week, my grandma would try to get us because our elementary school was across the street from my grandma's house. So we could stay there and then just walk across the street to her house. But yeah, so I mean, throughout my childhood into junior high, it was just working and just dealing with a little bit of just a dysfunctional home. My dad was brought up in a very bad environment. I don't think he really developed the understanding of what it was to be a dad. So it just kind of carried into his role as a dad. But I always knew like, well, he has other people around him. As a dad now, I'm like, he had other people around him. He had opportunities to kind of break that cycle and turn away from it, but he chose to stay in some of those things. But I don't know. So into junior high, like I said, I was getting into just different things, getting around different kids. Trying not to be home as much as I could. Struggled in school. Was in assisted reading classes all the way up through my senior year of high school. Loved working with my hands, just fell in love with that. I had no real intention of going to college. I thought maybe I would for a minute because I got accepted into a General Motors program, was going to go to work on cars. I got kind of talked out of that and became an electrician, my high school years were kind of the same thing. A lot of disorder, a lot of dysfunction. Started going to parties, drinking, partying.
Mm-hmm.
Never got into the drugs or anything like that. Only because I loved playing sports. I played soccer, I wrestled, so I felt like that would really affect my ability to play. So I was like, I don't want to hurt my lungs and get into that. So stayed away from that as much as I had friends that were all doing it. And I would, be driving around with them and they'd be, smoking and stuff. But, I try to stay away from that. But I knew like, hey, I can drink over the weekend or whatever and have some fun when I can. And, I'd still have to show up to work to work with my dad through high school. So like but he didn't really ever challenge that. He didn't question it. He's like, he's being a kid, So it was like, I remember the first time I ever tasted alcohol was with him, So it was like, it was kind of like, oh, kids are going to be kids,
Right.
But that led to some other things and just a lot of confusion in my life, because as my friends were going to college, right? So graduated high school, started working full time in the trades. All my friends are going to college because I went through Council Rock School District. Everything was like college prep classes. Everything in high school was like, let's get you ready for college. Let's get you ready for college. I'm like, I'm not going to college. It just wasn't for me. So as I started working full time in the trades, and all my friends are going to college and all these things, I was like, oh, cool. Like we're going to go to college parties and stuff. So I did that for a minute. But man, I got to a point where like life just continued to feel more and more empty, more and more empty. Started having issues at work, just not having the energy I should have, not having the clarity of my mind that I should have. The guy who was my journeyman at the time, who actually is my father-in-law now, he started kind of questioning some things in my life. And, I had been dating somebody else, at this time, and that relationship fell apart. It was like God was like stripping everything away from me. That relationship fell apart. Things at work weren't going well. All my friends were moving away, going to college. The party scene wasn't it anymore. And this is, I'm 19 years old. I'm 19 years old. I'm living at home. My room was in the basement, and like, I wanted to be away from light. You know what I mean? Like I had my room blacked out, windows blacked out. Like when I went into my room, it was like I just wanted to be alone. I didn't have anybody telling me that wasn't a good thing.
Right.
It was just kind of like, oh, this is just what life is.
Gotcha.
But it just continued to become this like crazy heavy burden on me, and like just really was tearing me apart inside. But from the outside, people saw like, oh, he's got a good job. He's working in the trade, he's making good money, he's got the car. He's got, it looks normal, like it's a normal American kid here, But it was eating me up inside, And I got to a point of and I just fell into like this really dark place in my life where, I found myself one afternoon, getting home from work and just thinking like, man, what do I have?
And how old are you at this point?
19.
19.
Yep. I'm like,
so you get home
I get home, I get home from work and like, I had a door that lifted out of the floor in our house, and that's how I got down to my room. Wow. So I go down in there, close the door, I go down, and I'm just, it's the middle of the day, but I'm just like, what do I have? What do I have? I got, I don't have any friends that I can call. I don't have anybody to really like lean on. I don't have anybody to talk to. Wow. So I was there, and I'm just like, what's the point? Like, what's the reason for tomorrow? Like, what am I looking forward to? Mm-hmm. Because I didn't have anything, and I'm like, I don't go out. I'm like, it was just, just a dark place in life. So I remember closing my door, and I always like tactical gear and stuff like that, like knives and all this. I had a pretty big knife selection, a collection and all that. And I remember, I grabbed a knife that I knew it had like a brass knuckle handle on it. So I knew like this is a knife I could get a good grip on. And I was on my knees in my room and just like had no, to me, I'm like, I have no reason for tomorrow. So I held the knife to my chest, and I remember on my knees pulling on this knife towards my chest, and I'm like pulling on this knife, and and it was just like this, like, it was this moment where I just like cried out, and I'm like, Lord, like, what is there? Like if you're real, like what is there? And that was when the Lord like truly met me in that moment and let me know I have a different plan for your life. This isn't it. I have a different plan for your life. And I just remember just being on my knees crying and just so confused now, because now I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, Lord, like, cause I had heard about the Lord, you know. I remember I had asked my grandmom about praying and getting saved. You know, I was about 7 years old, because I had heard the church service, there was communion, and I'm like, I don't know what communion is. And so I asked her about that. I asked my mom on the way to my grandmom's house, and then I prayed with my grandmom, and I believe at that age I had accepted Christ, but I had never really, I didn't devote anything to it. I didn't really surrender my life. I was just like, that was just something I did as a kid, you know.
Right.
But there was something about that, you know. We use this at the Rock all the time with Proverbs 22:6, right? Someone had planted a seed in my life, and it returned.
Well, let everybody know what Proverbs 22:6
Right.
is.
So train up a child in the way he should go, and when he grows old, he will not depart from it. So as a child, someone sowed a seed into my life just from sitting in a pew, from
Yes.
hearing different things. Because listen, you may not see it at first, but children are sponges.
Yes.
They're sponges. Every kid that comes in, they
Yes.
hear it, they
Yes.
listen,
What do we say? More?
is caught than taught. Right.
Yeah.
So it all came back, you know. So at 19 years old was when the Lord really, really met me on my knees in my room, thinking I had no purpose in life. So after that, you know, I try to just go back to work and just hide it all, you know. I didn't even know it, but I stopped talking to everybody. My father-in-law recognized it, he was just a guy I was working with. He recognized it. You know, we rode to work in silence. You know, he was a guy that, like, he would listen if you talked to him, but he didn't have to talk. We just rode to work in silence. And that went on for months and months. So I'm like, man, I need something in my life. So I bought a motorcycle. So I bought a motorcycle.
Wow,
I was
what
like,
a-
I need something in my life. I bought a motorcycle at 19 years old. And
What kind of motorcycle was it?
I bought a 2000, the year was 2000, Triumph TT600.
Okay.
It was the first bike that Triumph brought into the States back in 2000. I had it for 20 years.
Wow.
And then through some crazy things, I don't have it anymore, but it was one of 6 in the US for a while.
Wow.
So it was a piece of life that when I bought it, I thought it was going to be the fix. I thought it was going to be
Gotcha.
this device that saves me,
Gotcha.
right? Because now I'm like, what's my purpose? I don't know, but I'm going to buy a motorcycle. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to have fun. My mom was terrified. She hated motorcycles. My dad raced enduro motorcycles for years. My mom always hated them because they were dangerous, you know, and she didn't want to see her. I have an older sister and I'm the youngest. She didn't want to see her baby on a motorcycle, basically, you know. So bought a motorcycle, and I spent a lot of my time in that motorcycle just angry, just inside on that motorcycle, inside that helmet, just angry, you know, questioning so many things in life, yelling, screaming, listening to this crazy music inside my helmet, just angry, you know, still not knowing what the purpose was, right? I mean, I'm riding this motorcycle with no reserve of, like, if I die on it today, someone's going to miss me. I had no reserve. Like, if I die, no one's going to miss me. I'm just going to ride as hard as I can, as fast as I can, everywhere I went. I don't know if I should say that or not. People are watching, like, you know, I don't know. But I mean, I was never in any, like, unsolved accidents or anything like that, so he should be good. But the cops knew me. People, I grew up in a small town, you know.
Yeah, right.
They started to know my motorcycle. They started to know my truck. I lost my license. I had my license suspended. I had all these things happen because I was still just running from the Lord. Like, he told me I have a purpose, and I still wasn't going to church. I wasn't like, okay, now I know God has a purpose, I'm going to go to church. No, I was like, okay, I know I have a purpose. I wasn't supposed to.
Let me ask you a question. Like, you went to church as a young boy. Do you and you're 19 now. Do you think that do you remember hearing God's word at all as you sat in the pew with your mom and your dad? Do you remember anything? No, you don't remember anything.
The only thing that I recall from that was the communion service. Right. Other than that, I don't remember anything.
So what was it about the communion service that makes you recall later in life?
Well, it became a question to me. Like, what does that mean? You know, because they're talking about how, you know, Christ's blood and Christ's body for us and being broken for us, and, like, that stuck with me.
So that stayed with you.
That stayed with me.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well,
yep.
It gets no better than that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that was the questions I had.
Wow,
like, what does
that's
that mean?
amazing.
You know.
And later in your life, you reverted back to that.
Yeah.
You know, you remember that communion service.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah, and because it wasn't like all like the times I went to Awana and had fun. It wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't any of those things. Like if I think back about it, I think about those times, but like that wasn't
So, at
what it
what
was.
point and where were you when you ultimately gave your life to Christ?
So I believe I so hmm. So I believe in that day when I was 19 years old, I believe that's when I truly surrendered
Mm-hmm.
to the Lord. I truly surrendered to him and was like it
The day when you were in your basement?
yeah. I
Wow.
believe that was the day that I
With
surrendered.
this?
Yeah. Because I just did I wasn't strong
Wow.
enough, you know.
Yeah.
I think I surrendered that
Yeah.
day. I believe that was the day that I truly surrendered, you know, and because I mean, from that point on, you know, still started thinking about it, you know, but I didn't know what direction to go. I didn't know where to
Yeah.
go, you know.
Right.
I didn't know I should be going to church. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
because to be honest, the girl that I was dating was my pastor's daughter.
Mm.
So I didn't want to go to church. I'd been showing up to senior high youth group because she was there. So I'm
Ah.
like, well, what am I going to go back to church for? Like, that's not a thing anymore.
You
Like,
dirty dog,
yeah,
you.
yeah. So I'm like, now what do I do? You know, if I go back
Wow.
to, you know, so it was a very confusing time
Yeah.
for me, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so as I'm, you know, just being crazy on this motorcycle and all these things. I mean, this is a short period of time, but a lot of stuff happening. So 19 into 20. So at 19 years old into 20 years old, this guy that I'm working with, his name's Terry. This guy that I'm working with, he's like, hey, why don't you come over for dinner sometime? And I'm just like, oof, I don't know. I guess maybe. I know he's a guy from church. He was the guy that I talked to a lot before. He was friends with our pastor, you know, life friends with our pastor, and all. I'm like, oh, you know, maybe. I don't know. I don't know why this. He's got 5 kids at home. They're all homeschooled. I'm like, why would this guy want me around his kids? You know, I'm like, I don't know. So he asked me a couple different times, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, sure, I'll come over. So I go over for dinner, and I'm sitting there at dinner, and you know, look, I never had an organized dinner in my life. You know, it was TV dinners and The Simpsons. You know, TV dinners and like TV. You know, so like you know, he has this big Amish made table with leaves in it, benches around. He's sitting at the head of the table. His wife's sitting at the other side. His kids are all sitting there. The whole table's set. I'm like, man, what's going on here? I'm like, what is this? You know? So then he's like, all right, let's hold hands to pray. So they all held hands and we prayed. And I'm like, what in the world is this? It was such a bizarre experience for me, right? And
At that time.
And when I tell this story, so I just shared at a men's breakfast, and he was there, and I shared this story, and he was like, "It was just as bizarre for us," because when they said Amen, like I don't know about passing food from one person to the next, so I'm just reaching and getting my stuff, I'm filling my plate, and I start eating, and they're all, I don't even recognize it. The kids are all sitting there looking at me like, what is wrong with this guy? You know? So I'm like this goon, this heathen at this table with him, you know? Yeah. So that was the beginning of a different thing in my life, you know, because then I went there again, and I went again and again and again, and I just see this, and I'm just like, man, like this is what a family is supposed to look like.
Something different.
Right. I recognize the difference in this family. And you know, so through spending time with his family, my wife Jess is his oldest daughter. And when I first started hanging with her family, I was like, she's in a different universe compared to me. Like, cause my mind, and I'm like, she's in a totally different universe. Like, you know, we talked here and there, but it was never like, we were just friends with the family, you know?
Yeah.
But then over time and just spending time with her family and all of that. And you know, then he invited me down to their place down near Sandy Cove, which is in Northeast Maryland. He invites me down there for a weekend. So I stayed down there, and you know, the Lord just continued to just prepare things, you know, and he was changing my mind. He was working on my heart. I started going back to church, and I sat in church a lot of times, not even knowing why, right? Like, you know, I can't, Wycombe was a great church, sound teaching, but very, very like very deep, right? And I'm like, I'm barely scratching the surface. Like, I don't know any of the childhood Bible stories or anything like that, and they're teaching into some deep things. I'm like, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm here. Until they had a missions conference. So a missions conference happens. I go to the missions conference, and I'm sitting there and I'm listening. to somebody share about their experience as a missionary overseas in the Dominican Republic. And I'm like, man, I want to experience that. I want to experience it. I didn't even really know what it meant, but I'm like, listen, I want to experience that. So did some short-term mission trips, right? As 19, 20 years old, went on my first trip.
Where'd you go?
Went to the Dominican Republic. Yep. We worked with kids. We did a VBS for them. And we partnered with a missionary family over there who had a church that they had planted over there. So we went, and it was the first time in my life that I really felt at peace. It's the first time in my life that I remember sleeping and dreaming and having peace when I was there. And I was like, I don't know what that was, but it was amazing. So I come back from the trip, life starts happening. And as life is happening, you know, I kind of lose that fire, lose that excitement. You know, I was like, oh man, I'm losing. And then, you know, and I did that a couple of times. I was like, anytime a mission trip comes up, I want to go. So I went on another mission trip, And I was like, man, I think this is what the Lord wants me to do, is be in ministry.
So let me ask you a question. So when you think of missionary, typically, historically, you think of across the pond. Would you agree?
Overseas ministry.
Overseas ministry.
Ministry.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what made you come into Philadelphia?
So, well, it was a bunch of different things, right? So I started asking questions about being a missionary, right? And the answer that was given to me was, you need to go to college. You need to have you need to have a degree. You need to have a sending agent.
True.
You need to have a sending agency.
Okay.
You need to have the finances together and the support before we can send you. Like, those all kinds of things. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that. That's just not part of
who you are.
That's not who I was. I'm like, but I know God wants me to do this. Like, I know he does. And maybe it's just, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's just me working full time and going on trips and things like that. And I did that for a while. I joined up with an organization called Push the Rock. And we traveled overseas playing soccer in different countries and had an amazing time doing that. But then all along the way, I'm dating, you know, my wife, Jess. I'm dating her, and, you know, our relationship started to grow, and I bought my first house, and then we got married, and it was like, so then all of a sudden it was like, you know what? It's no longer traveling overseas because we both couldn't raise support to go. It was, all right, how can we continue this here? So we started praying about it. What's ministry here in the States, or where's their ministry for her and I to be?
Well, I can answer that for you. Do you want me to answer it for you?
Sure.
Okay. So 15 years ago,
Yep.
God spoke to you.
Yep.
And you've been here ever since, and you've never left once.
That's right.
Never, to my knowledge, you've never, it's just, you've been locked in ever since. And it seems to getting stronger and stronger as we go on.
Yeah.
Now, we also have let me tell you, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to have to, do segments with this guy. You know what I mean? So, but because we have so much more to talk about now, Charlie, hold on, I'm going to keep going for a minute. All right, a couple more minutes, and then you can cut this out. Or something. But I want to say this to you though, Kev. You know, like, I think, like, you know, I guess my encouragement to you, because you are an encouragement to me, you know, that, you know, you're a stickler for doing things right, and you bring order to the camp, and you bring consistency to kids' lives. You bring a work ethic that is second to none. So there's a lot of things that your father really has taught you, I believe. You know, like, you know,
sure.
You know, there's things you've gleaned from him. Your mom, of course. I love your mom. Your mom's a beautiful lady, and she's Korean descent, right?
Yep.
You know, but I think all those things, all those attributes that you have, you know, was gained when you were a kid. God just exposed them. And then, of course, your father-in-law sowed into your life, poured into your life. That's exactly what we want to do. And that's what we do to so many kids that come through the Rock, because 9 out of 10 kids in the hood, they have no father figure.
Right.
So the first thing that we desire to do, as you know, is introduce them to their Heavenly Father.
That's right.
And then the second thing is we want to model Christ to these young kids.
Yep.
You know, so but we got to talk about the youth factory. We
Oh,
got to
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
we got to talk about
yeah.
the building projects.
Yeah.
We got to talk about, what's it like from you walking from your house to here,
Yeah.
and tell everybody what it's like to actually live in Kensington.
Yeah.
And that's going to take another show. So this is our first time.
Yeah, it's like,
So-
life. We'll have to do another one. Life now.
Yeah, yeah. So, but would you come back and join us?
Yeah, I mean, listen.
You know?
Listen. When we sat down and talked about a podcast, that was exciting to me.
Yeah,
this is
I know.
exciting.
Yeah,
because there's people that don't know what's happening here at Rock Ministries, and it's just so important for them to hear. And there's other people that I feel like are in the same boat I was in. Right?
Yes.
They have
I
gifts,
agree.
they have talents, they have
I agree.
abilities, and they're like, man,
agree.
what can I do?
I agree.
And it's like, listen, come serve.
agree.
I'm not saying you got to come and serve for 15 years. Come and serve for a weekend. Come and serve for a week.
Yeah, I agree.
Come down and join us.
I agree.
Here.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to have to continue with that once we learn how to do this podcast thing. But I think so. What we'll do is we'll cut for now, and I want to just say this to you that there's something in the scripture that says that he says Christ says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one goes to the Father except through me." That's what Christ says, through him. And we want to end our podcast with just letting everybody know that we love Christ, we love Jesus, and we're grateful to be here, planted in the heart of in the epicenter of the drug trade, and because we know that our desire is to win souls for Christ. And we want to use this platform to honor him. And we want to speak to everybody. We have so many people that we're going to bring on and speak to them and have real rock talk. So thank you for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you again. God bless you.